Hey everyone, let's just dive right in. Today, this explainer is unpacking a seriously challenging, honestly kind of a paradigm-shifting perspective from Pastor Huzi Chiang. His devotional message goes deep into anxiety, faith, and how to find true peace. For those of us navigating the super fast-paced, high-stress reality of modern life, well, this is absolutely a concept worth exploring. So, you ready? Let's get to it.
I want you to honestly answer a question in your head right now. Would you classify yourself as a worrier? It's a pretty direct, soul-searching question, isn't it? In our day-to-day lives, anxiety is frankly everywhere. Maybe you're stressing out over whether a weekend typhoon is going to totally ruin your travel plans. Or maybe you're glued to the unpredictable financial markets, just feeling anxious about your future security. The source material points out that worry is a universally common human emotion. But how exactly should we view it?
To answer that, our source material takes us straight to a foundational text in the Gospel of Matthew. And notice, it doesn't offer some vague psychological advice. It gives a clear, direct command. Do not worry. This statement right here, it establishes the absolute baseline for the theological breakdown that the pastor builds his entire argument on.
So, Section 1. Is worry a sin?
To dig into this, the source cites Pastor John MacArthur, who makes a definitive and maybe surprising assertion. He argues that for a Christian, worry is fundamentally a form of disobedience. The argument here is that when you worry, you're essentially communicating a massive lack of trust in the Creator's provision and promises. From this specific theological standpoint, if you acknowledge a sovereign Creator, then worrying about anything is seen as an active transgression. It's an act of distrust.
Now, there is a fascinating grammatical nuance to this. The source highlights that in the original Greek text, the command given by Jesus carries an immediate call to action. It literally demands the cessation of an ongoing action. So, this breaks down into two distinct steps. Step 1, stop the current active cycle of worrying that's playing on loop in your mind. And step 2, never start doing it again. It's framed not as a polite suggestion, but as a firm directive to immediately cut off a destructive habit.
Moving on to Section 2. The real destructive power of worry.
You know, the historical roots of the word worry are incredibly revealing. It actually originates from the old German word würgen, which literally means to strangle or to suffocate. Wild, right? But this vividly illustrates the pastor's point. Anxiety isn't just some fleeting emotion. It actively chokes our thoughts. It suffocates our emotional well-being and often brings on immense mental and physical distress. And that leads us to a really powerful metaphor from the source material. Think about it. A worry usually starts incredibly small, just this thin, tiny trickle of fear. It feels completely justifiable to worry a little bit, right? But the analysis argues that once you encourage it, once you let it flow, this stream cuts a broad, deep channel in your mind. Before you know it, it spirals into overwhelming mental anguish, basically draining away all other rational or peaceful thoughts. So how are we supposed to actually respond to this? Well, the secular world often teaches us to expect the best, but always, always prepare for the worst. And honestly, that sounds incredibly practical. However, the source provides a spiritual alternative. It suggests a major shift, moving away from a reliance on personal, pessimistic preparation and instead completely centering your life on the Creator's sovereignty. The whole idea is that true, unshakable peace comes from this direct spiritual connection, totally bypassing the need for constant, anxious plotting.
Bringing us to Section 3, walking through the 7-year valley of depression. This is the life story of Elder Jean Junyu.
Elder Jean was once a highly successful general manager of a listed company. I mean, he was sitting right at the absolute peak of his career. But then, a minor stroke completely shattered his confidence. Losing his sense of control, he plunged into 7 long years of severe, debilitating depression, even reaching the point of contemplating ending his own life. It wasn't until 2018 that he experienced a profound spiritual breakthrough, which the source describes as the Holy Spirit opening his heart and finally liberating him from that incredibly dark valley.
During those impossibly dark years, 3 crucial lifesavers kept him afloat. First, there was the unwavering, fiercely protective love of his wife. Second, the constant care and persistent reminders from his mother to never, ever give up on life. And third, despite feeling immense pressure and honestly even bitterness, he maintained a sheer, stubborn persistence in seeking God by continually attending church gatherings. It was that exact support system and his unyielding perseverance that ultimately kept him alive.
So, what was the ultimate result of all that persistence? Well, look at this number. over 3,000. Since finally letting go of his bitterness and worry in 2018, Elder Jean has used his writing talents to share his life story with the world. He's written over 3,000 encouraging articles. It brilliantly illustrates the incredibly fruitful aftermath that can happen when someone finally just lets go of their anxiety.
All right, Section 4, Seeking God's Kingdom and Righteousness.
Here's where the pastor draws some very practical boundaries for faith. On one hand, the source makes it abundantly clear that God is not some magic genie. He's not going to magically fix a risky financial gamble you took or, magically write code for you when you hit a technical wall at work. But on the other hand, what God will do is grant wisdom, guide your dedicated studies, and provide an unshakable spiritual peace. It frames faith not as a tool for speculation, but as a solid foundation for facing real, practical challenges.
Now, this commitment to seeking help and dedicating oneself to learning, that connects directly to a foundational biblical principle the pastor mentions. Because if you rely solely on your own cleverness without this spiritual grounding, it is just incredibly easy to fall right back into that trap of anxiety the second you face unpredictable situations. True wisdom, the source argues, actually begins with a deep reverence and trust in the Creator.
Bringing it all full circle, the core message of the analysis really comes down to this specific biblical mandate. The source notes that while God promises to supply our daily needs, what to eat, drink, and wear, the promise is for spiritual contentment and daily sustenance. It's not a promise for luxury cars or giant mansions. The argument is that by placing the pursuit of spiritual fulfillment first, all those other material worries, they naturally just fade right into the background.
As this explainer wraps up, the pastor leaves us with some really warm, practical advice. He encourages all of us to take a real mental break this weekend. Literally step away from the frantic planning and the stressful financial numbers. Just find a true moment of rest. Reflect deeply on these spiritual truths and allow them to become the daily nourishment that actually fortifies you against life's stresses.
To close out today's explainer, I really want to leave you with this one thought. When the unexpected hits, and it will, do you rely on your own frantic preparations, or do you surrender to ultimate spiritual provision? It's a huge paradigm shift, one that asks you to deeply reflect on where you truly place your trust. Thanks so much for joining me to unpack all this, and I'll catch you next time.